She's making her way in. Let's please stand as she enters. Thank you so much to our minister for joining us. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, let's give her a huge round of applause. In the spirit of playfulness and celebration, a big, big thank you to our honorable minister, who we'll be hearing from later on. Thank you to her for being part of this and for understanding how important it is that we have this conversation. So let's give another warm round of applause. Big, big welcome to our minister and her team. You may be seated. Thank you very, very much. So as we were unpacking, I am very, very privileged to be the mom of 4 young children. So our children are aged 1.5, 3.5, 6, and 8. You can imagine how much Lego is in our house, how many Lego injuries I've sustained trying to jump over all the Lego that is all over. But sometimes a mess in a room is also a sign of children having fun. And again, as adults, we've got to rein ourselves in and say to ourselves, hold on, let children be children. Unfortunately, we live in a society where children are not always allowed to be children and allowed to focus on the things which truly, truly are so necessary for their early childhood development. So we'll be unpacking more of this as the morning unfolds, and I look forward to being part of those discussions. I'll also say this, that this is my greatest honor to be standing here today. I realize more and more as a mom, as a working mom, the huge responsibility that lies on the shoulders of our ECD educators, but also our day mothers, people who sometimes have to leave their own children to go to work in houses which are more privileged to look after and play with others' children, because that's the way for them to put food on the tables of their own families. So it is a huge, huge privilege for me to be standing here, to be working, to be at an in-person event. How many of you are excited to be at an in-person event? How amazing is that? And slowly but surely, we're getting a chance again to interact as a community. Umtu, ngumtu, ngabantu. We are because of others. And to be here in this room and to have you, all of our viewers online, all part of this community that understands that it takes a village to raise a child, we thank and we appreciate your time, and to all of you, your presence. And let's make sure that we build this village as best we can. So we have spoken about our love for ECD, and I know that I'm standing in a room where everybody is as passionate about ECD. I'm so glad to see my UNICEF family here as well, doing incredible work. And then also, I want to remind you this, that no event these days is an event without a hashtag. Whew, Dingu, millennial. Ooh, I'm such a millennial. I'm not a millennial, ladies and gentlemen. I do realize that when it comes to social media, I'll leave it to the Mini Dlaminis and the Bonang Matebas, who are much cleverer than I when it comes to social media. However, it is lovely to spread the word. So we do have a hashtag for our event today. And I also want to invite you to use the hashtag, or if there are any comments that you'd like to make, and this is to you as well, viewing from your office or from your home office, please do use the hashtag ECD Census, and that'll help us to just put together some of the comments or questions perhaps, and I can mention them as the morning progresses. But yes, in the interest of time, I'm going to stick to my schedule over here, because we do have a jam-packed morning, and I want to make sure we all get a chance to delve into these good issues that need to be discussed. Now, following the first nationwide 2021 ECD Census, the Department of Basic Education, in partnership with the Lego Foundation, will today reveal the census results and impact. For more context of the importance of today, I'm delighted to welcome onto stage the director at the Lego Foundation South Africa, Kerry Casson, and she's coming to the floor for our opening remarks. Let's give her a huge round of applause as she makes her way. I want to invite you to stand with me a little while, because Kerry, I was so delighted at a play conference we did about 3 years ago. We had a chance to chat, and it's just so lovely to share the stage with someone who shares such passion for ECD. She works or has worked extensively in the international development space for many years, and she's now the director at the Lego Foundation South Africa, where she works to make playful learning a reality for millions of children, working across the educational ecosystem with caregivers, government, and of course educators. Now, Kerry, I want to say to you, you're my real life super model, super woman, super educator, because the work that you do with the Lego Foundation is phenomenal. And my kids are so excited when I say to them, I'm sharing the stage with the head of the Lego Foundation today. So please, can I get a photograph? There we go. Hashtag ECD Census. And Carrie, let's be playful together. Over to you.
Thank you, Joanne. I mean, I'm not sure what to say after that, so I'll just go to my remarks. So firstly, Honorable Minister Motshekga, Program Director, stakeholders and ECD experts in the field, representatives of non-governmental organizations and civil society, members of the media, welcome. On behalf of the Lego Foundation and the Department of Basic Education, it brings me great honor to welcome you to our first national ECD Results and Impact event. Together with the Department of Basic Education, we stand before you incredibly proud of what we have been able to achieve through our unified goal of accelerating early childhood development and harnessing the power of play-based learning. We really hope that today's event will stir up a sense of purpose and inspiration for the work that lies ahead, because we all know that there's a lot of work to be done. The Lego Foundation has invested in projects globally with the goal of improving the overall quality of education and transforming educational systems. We believe that the best way to do this is to encourage a play-based learning methodology, because every moment of play is a moment to learn. In South Africa, as we know, millions of children are unable to develop to their full learning potential due to a lack of early learning opportunities. At the Foundation, our goal is to help every child reach their highest potential by empowering them to navigate this complex world. Today takes us one step closer to accomplishing that mission. Many of us here today understand that child development is incredibly complex. Given the chance to be creative, to collaborate, to iterate, we know that children develop essential skills that will last a lifetime. Our children thrive on play. Most importantly, and especially in our South African context, play is open to everyone, no matter background or ability. For us, it's vital that children, especially in the earliest years of their lives, experience moments of joy and meaningful connection. If we can get this right at the beginning, this means that our children will be better equipped to develop a variety of skills to serve them and the communities in the future. We do recognize that for all children to be exposed to these kinds of vital early learning experiences, solid national systems are required. When the Lego Foundation and the Department of Basic Education began this journey over 2 years ago, we were met with a lot of uncertainty, noting that something at this scale could never be done. I'm immensely proud that not only were we able to complete the task through the amazing support of the ECD sector, but that we have done it well. We often hear that the ECD sector is divided, but I'm here to acknowledge and thank the thousands of ECD champions who stood up and said, let us be counted. It is clear today that the ECD sector is standing together. The question is, how can we now best support them? Our investment at the Lego Foundation in the ECD Census is an investment in the most important citizens of this country, our children. Thank you and welcome.
Fantastic. Kamogelo, making sure that everything is perfectly sanitized. Thank you very, very much for that. Interesting times that we live in. And I just want to say this, and Carrie, sorry, I'm going to share a little bit of a story that you shared with me, but Carrie was explaining that she had practiced her speech with her daughter, and then her husband called and said, oh, okay, it's time for bed. And the daughter said, no, give me some time. Children must play. And I just thought it was so interesting. Carrie was saying how children do listen. They are always listening. They are always observing. They are really the most incredible little sponges. And as adults, as parents, and I don't just say parents, because again, we realize it takes a village to raise a child. Our grandparents, the person at the shop who chats to your child while you're buying the normal bread and milk every day. Everyone is part of this village that raises our children. And it is so important that we learn to sometimes become more like them and less like ourselves. As adults, we've got so many inhibitions and we've got so many, oh, you can't, oh, you can't. And it's so lovely to learn from children who really have got confidence. And to me, I remember growing up, my mom had a night dress for me. I don't know how many of you had these long night dresses, nighties. I was from the Western Cape, so we call it a nightie, you know, like you wear this long nightie. And at night, my mom would make me stand in front of the mirror and read this affirmation. I am talented, gifted, creative, charming, brilliant, sweet, thoughtful, witty, dynamic, and a joy to be around my mommy. And it is so important that we instill confidence in our children. To this day, and that was actually the last thing that my mom was able to write. And this is not a sad story. It's actually, for me, a story that I want to share because I want to say to you that time is our most important thing. My mom's developed dementia, so she's unable to write anymore. However, for our second child's baby shower, she took a long t-shirt and wrote on it just that affirmation. I am talented, gifted, creative, charming, brilliant, sweet, thoughtful, witty, dynamic, and a joy to be around my mommy. And I want to say this, as ECD professionals, as educators, as parents, as members of this global village that it takes to raise our children, let's raise our children with confidence, because that is one of the most essential tools we can equip them with before we send them out into this big, big world that sometimes weighs heavily on our shoulders as adults. Imagine how heavily it weighs upon theirs. So let's give them confidence and the tools which don't cost money, but the tools which we can all, as a global community, give our children to make them stronger for this world we send them out into. Kerry, I've always been fascinated by the power of play. And again, since I've become a mother, the importance of play specifically in childhood development has become increasingly clear to me. My children are always saying, Mommy, come play with me. I've got a big bruise on my thigh because I was goalkeeper for just over 30 minutes. I've also got a cramp in my leg because I had to pretend to be a striker and play and do all the It is amazing how they invite us to play. And sometimes we say we don't have time. It's the most important time that you have. Children play to make sense of the world around them and to find meaning in an experience by connecting it to something already known. Through play, children learn about the world and they also learn about themselves. They also learn skills that they need for study, for work, for relationships. With that in mind, I want to invite you to become a little bit more like them. With that in mind, we invite you to enjoy a short play experience before we move on with our program. You've received your welcome packs, and I must give credit to the organizers. Those are beautiful bags. In them, you'll find a game. So have a look. I do feel like Oprah. You get a bag, you get a bag, you all get a bag. So open up your bags and have a look inside. Have you found them? They are rolled up. There's some little elements. There's the box with some interesting blocks. But then there's also the rolling out, Kamogelo, marabara. How do I say it? We called it something different when I grew up, but so we're going to invite all of you to play. Kamogelo? Come. Morabara. There. Is that right? Morabaraba. Okay. Do you all see it? Those of you watching from your home offices, this is where you're going to see how playful those in the room can be. Has everyone found it? Okay. There we go. So now you've got to figure it out because that's part of play as well. So have a look at the instructions. Have a look at the instructions. I can see everybody. It feels a little bit like Christmas morning, all of you unwrapping your presents together. Look at that. So we've got all your games out. So actually, you know what? We've decided the board game we want you to play at home with your kids, but the blocks I'm going to hand over to our wonderful colleague here from the foundation. How do I introduce you?
Any way you like.
Per, I know your name, but what should I call you? The Minister of Play today?
Rather not.
Okay,
rather not.
But Per is going to do a lovely presentation of just how we're expected to play with this, because I've also realized as adults, you get a box of toys and you're a little bit worried. You first want to go into Google and say, how do I play with this? So teach us.
Yes, I'll do my very best.
Oh, representative of play.
Yes. Good morning, Honorable Minister, everybody. You ready to play? As Joanne said, my name is Per. I'm from the Lego Foundation. And when you invite us, you pretty much always kind of invite to some kind of play. And that's what we'll be doing now. We need to use this box, the brown box with the wonderful wooden blocks inside. Everyone find that? Then you need to find a partner as well. So the person that you're sitting next to or across, like kind of, what we would like you to do is to collectively see how tall a structure you could build with these blocks, stacking them on top of each other. You can use the table, you can use the floor, you can use whatever you like to as a foundation. How tall a structure can you make? You need to help each other and you need to start now.
That sounds like some kind of structural engineering. Very exciting.
Let's clap our hands. Ayo, ayo. Let's clap our hands. Ayo, ayo. Let's clap our hands. Ayo, ayo. Let's move our.
I can hear some yelps of excitement. Either that table is doing really well or really badly. So let's see.
Let's move our shoulders.
How tall can you get it? How many of these wooden blocks can you get up in the air?
Andre from UNICEF is saying he's doing this with prayer. That's looking very well.
One, two, three, four, five.
Goodness. Okay.
We have
Not
someone
even
over
a
here who
prayer
has
helped.
stacked seven on top of each other.
So you can have a good foundation, right, Per? I saw they had a good foundation. Here they're going for creativity. Oh my goodness, look at this.
There are a few more minutes. We have 7 as the highest now, I think, if we are counting. You have 7 there as well, Andrew? Remember to help each other.
I wonder when the last time was that you got to build a structure at work.
One minute left.
How long does it have to stand, Per? Is it just, how long does it have to stand? At the moment that you say 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, should we see?
Hands off.
Hands off.
Yeah.
So we'll do a countdown. In a minute, we'll do a countdown and then all hands off and we'll see how it goes. Dr. Whittle's having a good laugh here, but what are you building? Come, Dr. Whittle.
20 seconds.
I'm going to count down with you, Per. And at the end, hands off, right?
Yes.
And then we'll have a quick judging.
What skills do they believe they just exercised?
Are we counting down?
We are from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hands off! Hands off!
We've got 7 high. 7 high.
7 high. I heard 8 someone say at one point.
Who's got 8?
I'm not sure if these guys maybe had 8 at some point,
8.
then it fell over.
Oh, whoa. We've got, that's 8. And they've got a good foundation there as well. Okay.
6.
We have 8. We have 8 here. 8 levels. 8 levels.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, before we end this little play session, I have a question that I would like to ask you.
That's 7. Huh?
Are you ready for a question? Sorry, it's always hard to make people stop playing again. That's almost like a side effect of it. But please listen to my question. Please listen to my question. Which skills do you believe that you have just exercised doing this activity we just did? Just kind of shoot them out. Thinking, yes. Organizing. Fine motor skills, collaboration. Creativity, patience, yes. Problem solving. Emotional, I heard over here, yes. Thank you. Thank you. We'll stop it here. We could potentially make a very, very long list of skills that we have just exercised in a simple play activity. And that is what play does to us. Thank you very much.
Per from the Lego Foundation, and I think that was a wonderful way to set the scene. How do you guys all feel after that? I've seen a lot of smiles and I've seen a lot of, like you said, the patience exercise, but I think it was a wonderful way just to set the scene. So please do take your boxes home, your gifts, and go and practice this at home. You know what I'd love to see? I'd love to see if your kids at home are able to better the maximum in our room was 8, right? Using 2 blocks as a foundation, if I saw correctly. Okay, and I saw you also had 2 blocks. You had a double foundation. Okay, so I think please do take them home and try this with your kids also, or with whichever kids you find in the house tonight. Please do make sure that you try this, and I'd love to hear how many levels they are able to build up. But I think, yes, it set the tone for the morning, and we're going to be hearing a lot of important facts, but I think the important thing is also that we, as adults, become more playful. We're going to have a keynote address from the Honourable Minister of Basic Education later on, not just now, followed by a panel discussion on the outcomes and implications for early childhood learning through play in South Africa. But before we do that, and before we find out about the findings, please let's have a look at our audio-visual presentation, which will take us through the wonderful journey that this project has had thus far.
It is estimated that there are 50,000 ECDs nationwide, and there is no ECD database for this. So the Department of Basic Education, funded by the Lego Foundation, actually commissioned Ikapatata as the data collection company to go into the communities and do this data collection.
Today because I heard my mother say that you are going to be counting all the schools for young children. Is that true?
Yes, Zuzu. We're going to be counting all the creches and play groups and all the places where our most important citizens under the age of 6 stay during the day. And it's called a census.
That sounds like a big job. Do you need any help?
Yes, we do need your help. Because the more creches that we count, the more we can plan and make sure that you and all your friends continue learning the most important thing.
Oh, and what's that, Mama Angie?
Learning to play, of course.
The ECD Census is groundbreaking in the sense that it's for the first time we will be collecting data that will be updated annually going forward. When COVID struck in the ECD Centre, the fact that we didn't have a database and didn't know where ECD programs are made it very difficult to support the sector. And in terms of long-term planning, to know how do we need to plan for instance, increasing the subsidy. How do we do our budgeting for the next 10 years to see how we can increase funding to the sector? How can we do our HR planning to ensure that we are supporting the sector and that we've got support allocated to the areas that need it most?
A crucial part of training is research ethics to ensure that the field workers know what to do in the field and how to carry themselves and to do things that are in line with our values.
We check all the known ECDs which are on the portal. Sometimes you'll find that the numbers are not correct. You'll find that the addresses are not correct. Then we relied mostly on the communities.
Because not every person is the same. Some may be rude, some may be calm, some may be, I could say, hesitant to agree because we just get a random phone call from someone who says from some company wanting to conduct an interview with you. The data that we collected should create equality on all the ECDs around the country so that everyone can benefit from them, even the ECDs that are starting from scratch.
We managed to capture all our awards that were given, and we completed all the awards. We managed to find all the known ECDs that were allocated on our fieldwork portal. We also managed to get a lot of new ECDs that were not known. We managed to capture them as well, as much as they matters.
Most ECDs maybe just concentrate on just teaching children and they don't incorporate learning through play. So now what the Lego Foundation is interested in is that ECDs should have time for children to learn through play.
What we do normally, we would use anything like ice cream sticks to teach them how to count, and we just use different objects that we would find just to engage them. So I think they are doing an awesome job because it's just going to make life easier for upcoming parents.
Wow, that's beautiful. That deserves a round of applause, I think. And I love the tagline, because children count. And that is so, so important. I think that's one of the biggest things for me here, is that the work that is being done by ECD centers and through educators all throughout the country, it is absolute foundation. It is the solid brickwork that we need for our country to become better. And our children do count. And I think it's important that all of us in this room and all of us watching online, that we go out there and spread that message. Let's make sure that we do right by those who matter so much. It is now time for us to hear more about the 2021 ECD Census results and the key statistics. We are going to be joined now by Dr. Jan Schenk from Ikapa Data. Please welcome him to the stage. Let's give him a warm round of applause.
I must admit, I'm watching this video. It's giving me goosebumps, because if you work on a project for such a long time, you sometimes forget what it's all about. And seeing our field workers and seeing these crashes and seeing the ECD practitioners really is making me a little emotional even. And it's really nice to see that energy in this room. And I really hope that that energy also goes out to these practitioners and field workers and everybody who helped us along the way. Because it was a huge effort, as you can see in the video. We literally went into all parts of South Africa, very remote parts. There was a lot of work on the ground, and which meant that our field workers really worked tirelessly for 4 months during a very challenging period of time. So yeah, thanks to the field workers, but thanks to the community members and all the people on the ground who made this happen. All right, this presentation is divided into 2 parts. The first part is about the nuts and bolts of running a ECD census during a pandemic. And the second part is about the results and the most important insights that we gained from this exercise. And before we went into field, we thought very long and hard about how we're going to do this. And so the next slide is going to give you an insight of what ideas we came up with. So we developed 2 data capture instruments. One was an interview with principals, ECD principals, and the other one was there to capture observations at the ECD programs about infrastructure, about the state of the building, about the equipment and materials that are available at these ECD programs. And then we spent 3 weeks of testing those instruments. And we did this under real life circumstances. We had teams of field workers going into field and testing these instruments extensively. And then we went back and we revised some of our questions and tools. We then recruited 360 field workers, around 360. And we prioritized people with a background in early childhood development, preferably people who worked with children before. And we also background checked all of our field workers, which is quite important for a study of this kind. We then spent a period of time, multiple weeks, training these field workers. It was COVID regulations were still in place. You could only train up to 50 people at a time, or actually less, because you couldn't allow more than that number in a room. So we had 11 workshops across the country where we trained them over a period of 3 days. And how we approached this whole field work was we structured it by wards. So our rule was we're gonna go into each and every ward in the country, and we're gonna first go to all the ECD programs that we knew were already there, and make sure that we captured each and every one of those. And then we would spend quite a bit of time finding new early learning programs that we didn't know about before. Which meant that our field workers had access to all the phone numbers of the ward councillors, for example, of DSD officials, and of ECD networks operating in the area where we were looking for the programs. We spent, on average, we visited each ward on 4 different days. So we made sure that we also went back sometimes, because sometimes, for example, we wouldn't be able to access a program on the day we visited, and then we would come back another day and make sure that we could capture that program another day. And in fact, most or almost all of the wards were visited on more than 1 day. And some of them, 20%, we actually spent quite a lot of time in them, and we spent 8 or more days in those wards. And what we also did, we not just went to the ECD programs that were like given or that we knew about or other people told us about, but we also required our field workers to really cover every corner of the ward. And they actually had to go to all these different parts of the ward and had to capture locations. So we in the office could see that on a map that they really covered every part of a ward. And during this process, we actually captured 240,000 GPS locations. So this gives you an idea of the coverage. If you look at the big map, the red dots are all ECD programs. And as you zoom in, you can see all the places we went to, like street by street, always making sure that we also captured locations so we can double check that we really didn't miss any part. Now, aside from driving around and looking for programs on the ground, We also used a whole lot of other avenues to try to find ECD programs. So we had quite a bit of help in the beginning from the Bangasari dataset, which was a dataset of known ECD programs. We worked with ECD forums and asked them to send us lists of their members. We worked extensively on the ground with local DSD officials who gave us their lists of programs. But we also worked with primary schools, ward councillors, local clinics, community leaders and community members. And we also broadcasted advertisements on local radio stations. On top of that, we had a WhatsApp bot in place where ECD principals could get more information about the census and also register their program for a visit. And this embrace of technology was very important for us to actually get the job done in the time that we had, because we had to do it between the third and the fourth COVID wave. And we already knew that our time would be limited, and we had a very real deadline this time around. And we had to make sure that we work efficiently. So we really took advantage of a lot of tools and innovations. For example, we had a fieldwork portal where our field workers were logging in with their name and a password, and they could see the wards and assigned to them, and they could keep track which ECD programs they've already visited, and they could even see how much they earned to the point in time, which made it just easier for a lot of administrative purposes. We had a whole backend where all the data was coming in through the tablets. So all data was captured on tablets, and the data was coming in into the backend, and that was feeding into a dashboard where you could see all the progress and also quality control in real time. And we had a system where like issues with the data or like questionable or like non-intuitive findings were sent to our quality control staff in real time automatically by the system. And we had something in place that we call the ward completion protocol. So it was basically, as the data came in, we could check in real time on maps and in the data set that a ward was really done. And only if our control staff was happy with the award being completed, the team on the ground was allowed to move on to the next ward. So that's just an example of the tools that we're using. So there's the portal where you could see field workers had access to phone numbers, for example, of stakeholders on the ground. Then that's a dashboard or part of the dashboard, and that would be a map where you could track the progress in real time. All right, the next few slides will give you a sense of the scope and the coverage of the ECD census. And this is probably the most important figure for today. So if you don't remember anything else, just this figure, that will do. So after cleaning the data and making sure that we don't have any invalid records or duplicates in the data set, we counted 42,420 ECD programs in South Africa. If you break this down by province, you will see that this distribution follows the population breakdown. So in the more populous provinces like Gauteng, you had around 10,000 ECD programs, in KZN 8,000. On the other hand, in Northern Cape, which is the least populated province, there are around 900 programs. You can also look at the distribution by socioeconomic indicators. So we used the school quintiles, and the school quintile is a indicator of socioeconomic standing assigned usually to schools. So 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. And we used the quintile of the closest school because we had the GPS locations. You could make these calculations and assign the quintile of the closest school to the ECD. And when you do that, then you see that about half of the ECD programs fall into the 2 lowest quintiles, and around a quarter fall into the 2 highest quintiles. You can also look at it in terms of rural versus urban. So we use the StatsSA census maps to classify areas into rural and urban. And if you do that, then you see that around 60% more or less of the ECD programs are in urban areas and 40 are in rural areas. Now this map shows you the number of ECD programs or early learning programs per 1,000 children, and the units that you're seeing here are municipalities. And what you can see, basically just looking at it, is that parts of the Western Cape and the metros in general have a higher density of early learning programs if you count it per number of children. And that's just an example of the type of analysis that this data set allows us to do now, which wasn't possible before. So combining location data and population data, you can now see, and you could take that to a very granular level, for example, by wards, and have very quickly, very good insights on where is a lack of access to early learning opportunities. Okay, so we counted a lot of things during the census, and the next few slides are about these counts that we did. And for example, what we did, we counted the number of children enrolled in ECD programs, and we used the actual registers that programs have and counted the number of children in these registers to come up with the total enrollment number. And that's around 1.7 million. But then we also counted the children that we actually saw, that we were actually there at the time of our visit. And that's around 1.2 million. Now that number is probably a bit low because you have to also consider that our field workers came at different times. So sometimes some of the children might have already left an ECD program on a day, or they might have arrived a bit later after our field workers have been there. But we also asked the ECD practitioners that are working at the ECD program of how many children are usually present on a typical day. And when you count that figure, then you come to around 1.5 million. And that's just to demonstrate that enrollment or registration does not necessarily translate into attendance. So that's also one finding of the census. We did ask about how many children used to attend this program before the pandemic. And if you take that number, it was around 2 million. And that's very important to consider with any of these numbers. The COVID had a very big impact on the sector. At the time you were doing the census, a lot of programs, which are probably still feeling the impacts very, very strongly, felt it even more back then. Some of them even closed down, either temporarily or permanently. So that's these are numbers taken to a pandemic, but still they're very meaningful. Now, one number which is important here is the 200,000 staff that we counted. And staff includes learning staff or practitioners, but also support staff and sometimes management. If you take that number and you divide them by the number of ECD programs, you come to an average of 4.7 staff, or around 5 staff members per ECD programs on average. But if you only look at the teaching staff or the practitioners, you come with a number at around 4 teaching staff per ECD program. And if you look at the number of children that are enrolled and take the program count, you see that on average, there are 39 children enrolled at an ECD program. But that number ranges or differs widely from program to program. We had a lot of very small programs with less than 6 or less than 5 children. And then there are other considerably bigger programs too. If you look at the age distribution of children, you will see that children born between 2016 and 2018 represented around 2/3 of the children that are enrolled at those places. That's roughly children aged 3 to 5 at the time that we did the census. There were some children which were even sometimes in school-going age and still being at ECD programs. And then you also had some places which accepted or had younger children. Okay, before I finish, some more key results, some really numbers that stuck out as we went through the data. One important one is the registration with DSD. And registration can mean registered as a partial care facility or as an ECD program. And if you look at that, around 40% of ECD programs are registered with DSD in some form. 16 are in the process of registering, and 42% say they're not registered. And that more or less goes in line with how many ECD programs claim that they receive a subsidy from DSD, which is about a third. And 2/3 claim they don't receive a subsidy from DSD. That's also then in line with when we asked about the primary source of funding. So only 27% say the primary source of funding is government. That doesn't mean that the other ones didn't get any funding from government, but when you ask what is the most important one, they say government. And a great majority, around 70%, fees are the main source of income. So if you look at fees, 509 Rand is the average fee amount. So around 500 Rand, but also again, this figure changes widely between programs. So actually 50% of programs charge less than 300 Rand or up to 300 Rand. And 10% charge 1,200 Rand or more. So it's also a significant number of programs which actually have a much bigger income from fees than others. What this slide shows that the importance of ECD programs in the nutrition of children in South Africa. And because what we found is that 77% of ECD programs provide at least one meal to the children at the program. Other sources of providers of meals would be parents or government. We looked at the sanitation and hand washing facilities at ECD programs. And what we found is that 77% of ECD programs have access to taps for hand washing. And the rest would be distributed across bowls or using bowls or buckets or using a tippy tap. Now for toilet facilities, only 60% say they have a flush toilet, and which means 40% have other means for toilets, mostly pit latrines or septic tanks or chemical toilets or bucket latrines sometimes. And 35% had potties for young children. I think, at least from my perspective, a positive finding is that a large proportion of ECD practitioners have a relevant qualification. So 22% say they don't have a qualification, but on the other hand, more than half or just over half of these ECD practitioners have a recognized qualification, and 26% have also training in a relevant program, through a relevant skills program. Part of the interview that we did with the ECD principals was about learning through play and how they incorporate play in the daily programs. And one question was about how much time do you allocate to free play during the day, either as part of the daily program or when they play outdoor. And what we found is that roughly in each instance, half of them allocate only 30 minutes or less to free play. And if you look at this by quintiles, you will see that the ECD programs in the higher quintiles actually allocate more time to free play than ones in lower quintiles. We also found that about a third of them actually don't have access to an outdoor playground with suitable equipment. And only 56% have access to age-appropriate books for different age groups. More than that had access to books in general, but when you asked about specifically age-appropriate books, it's 56%. One interesting finding is when we looked at what play and learn materials were available and accessible at these ECD programs, our fieldworkers had basically a checklist of 20 different types of toys and books and learning materials that they were trying to find in the ECD program. And what we found is that on average, ECD programs that were subsidized by DSD, we found 14 of these different types of materials. Those were not subsidized by DSD, only had 11 on average. All right, what are the next steps? At least for what the data is being concerned. So a summary report is being made available, I think, either today or tomorrow. And a full report will follow in June 2022. And we also want to provide provincial profiles where you can see the breakdowns of all these results by province. In the meantime, also anonymized data sets will be made public. So everybody, researchers and academics and sector experts, will have access to the full data set without the identifying information. So we're not going to include any names or addresses or anything like that, but all the rest of the data will be there. And it's going to be made available via Data First at UCT. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, sobering results indeed, but we need to know what we're dealing with in order to make things better, correct? So we all see that there's lots of work to be done, and our leader and the person at the helm of making sure that the work gets done is our incredible and honorable Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga. So without further ado, let's put our hands together and give her a warm, warm welcome as she makes her way to the stage.
No, thank you very much, Program Director. Let me acknowledge the representatives of the LEGO Foundation, Mr. Caspar Kastrup and Ms. Kerry Cousin. The representatives of the UNICEF, representatives of basic education led by our two DDGs, DDG Geya and DDG Whittle, stakeholders and experts in the sector, representatives of non-governmental organizations and civil society, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, Absheni, good morning, Dumelang, Di Machero, Huemore, Tovel. So all of them are greetings. Tovel. Indeed, Program Director, it gives me great pleasure to address the very first early childhood development ECD census that has recently taken place. And I'm extremely grateful and appreciative of the data because indeed it will help us really get a feel of what we're getting into. Because as a sector, DDG would say it's a new terrain for us. It's a new terrain as a sector. Though all the time we knew that our future and our fortunes lie there. Unless we can sort out the early stages of the foundations for learning, our work is almost impossible. So we're very excited to have this census, this report, since we took over the responsibility of early childhood development. Because indeed, as I said, for us, ECD, it's really a foundation of the work that we do. We always say in the sector, that's where it starts, and sometimes that's where it ends. The size of your, we always make an example, the size of your house depends on the strength of your foundation. If you have a small foundation, then you're not going to have a big house. If you have a weak foundation, you're not going to rise any higher. And that's where it starts normally. So we're very grateful to get this support, the information that we've received now, because indeed we believe that ECD is a foundation for cognitive development and the future success of our learners. We're grateful to the Legal Foundation for its ongoing support, because it's not the first program that we really get support from yourselves. And I was even saying to the they've become fellow travelers in this journey of education. And thank you very much for all the support that you've been getting from yourselves. We're grateful to the foundation for its support, which did ensure that we're able to carry out the census. And we're indeed proud of its successes as reported, and are happy to receive the insights contained in the report. It is important to remind ourselves about the main objectives of the ECD Census, which indeed for us was to gather reliable data and information as much as possible to help us to move towards a centralized information system that integrates the ECD master list into our MES, which will enable us to improve resource allocation and the support to the ECD centers across the country. And I recall how we finally, I think, because it was a battle to get ECD to basic education. We had to make a case at the ANC, the ruling party's policy conference, to say, you want us to give you quality results. That's where it starts, and that's where it's going to end. Unless you allow us to work with social development to build solid foundations, we're not going to succeed. And this data is going to really, and the other reason we said we're a big sector, we have a big footprint, we're everywhere, we'll be able to work anywhere as a department. We will integrate information of ECD already in the existing database, and indeed this is going to help us. So we have the second round now as the governing party. We're going back to conference, we're busy with the policy, and I'll proudly report to say, you see, I told you that give it to us, we will integrate it to our MES system, and thanks to you. So I'm going to make a big case why we should now be allocated the budget. We did it through you, so thank you very much. We had a roundtable yesterday. I wish I had this information yesterday, because we had to reflect on what is the progress of what we made since our last policy conference, which gave us this mandate to take over ECD. So I'll tell them that there's outstanding information on the report I gave. So here's more data. Because we believe that having access to reliable data on children accessing ECD services in their target cohort and the number of practitioners providing these services, their qualifications, I was actually quite relieved to see that we're not starting from a very weak base. Our teachers, the teachers in the ECD sector are qualified, others have had some programs. So at least it gives us a sense of really where the big gaps and where the challenges are. And again, I'm relieved that it's not as disastrous as I thought before. So I'm sure you're also relieved, Manuela, that it's not that bad. So we have a starting point. So we believe that these results will assist us also to monitor trends in the ECD sector over time and contribute towards the development of children at an early stage so that they can thrive and as they grow older in the education system. So although we believe that our ECD sector still faces significant challenges, including those related to infrastructure, access to and quality of ECD programs offered, the qualifications of our ECD practitioners, the training that is there, the institutional capacity and funding, those are some of the problems that we've already identified and are trying to work on them. It is encouraging also to see that there's been some progress. And as I said, there's also some green shots which give us a sense that we have a very good platform to start from, and it's very encouraging. So as we prepare to forge ahead of our priorities in the area of growth, we will, as I said, as the governing party, continue to work towards the universal access to quality ECD programs for our children, as it is articulated in the NDP, streamlining the ECD registration to expand access to funding, training their professional staffs even further, and creating career paths, because I also see careers for young people in that area. So it will also enable us to have career pathing for young people in different areas of the ECD program. Supporting enterprises, again, I saw the blog, so between ourselves and Legal will be selling and creating and innovating to create more of these learning instruments. Strengthening the play-based learning curriculum, improving infrastructure provisioning, including descent sanitation. I also had a discussion with my DDG this morning saying, also just reflecting on the sector, because it's a new sector, so it occupies our minds all the time, to say with a district development model, we will also want to put it at the center, because it really straddles from local government to provinces to ourselves, and could be a very good case for one program, one plan in the government, so that we all bring our resources in terms of our mandates at different levels of government. So those are some of the things that I think this information will even help us with. Because as a lead department, we'll be able to go to COCTA to say, here's the number of centers, let's see how this can be modeled in a district development model, and how we can really put ECD as the center, at the center of all the work that we do. So the findings with regards to learning through play do indicate that we need to invest in professional development of our practitioners, as the results shows that relatively little time is allocated to free play and materials and equipment that lend themselves to free play, such as fantasy toys and pits, or less common than other toys. Again, children accessing ECD programs in lower income quintiles, again, as the presenter was saying, expectedly, that access will be lower in activities and the quality of the programs will be less. Again, that it will help us to really say, this is the basis for our planning. The findings and many others related to it, I think, corroborate some of the information that we have been receiving, and I'm quite excited also as a minister that we've just received our report of Thrive by 5. Again, I did make sure that we share it also with the governing party to say, here are the outcomes. If you really want us to make progress, these are the areas we have to look at to build from. So again, this is really corroborating some of the information that we're getting. As government and the ruling party, we are committed to closing this access gap between children from higher income quintiles and households and those coming from lower income quintiles and households. Program director, we have to deliberately put in place policies and programs that intend to prioritize ECD as a critical component of overcoming the negative impact of poverty in young children in our especially poor communities. I recently got hold of a report from UNICEF people are here, we're saying the assessment that was in Kenya, and that's where we shared the report, that unless there's intervention, children at 22 months, and that's any intervention, they'll be in the same situation 22 years down the line. So if they are trapped in poverty and nothing is done to mitigate against the difficulties, at the age of 22 exactly, they'll be where they were. So then if you have to change their fortunes, which means you have to change them much more earlier. And again, as government, we've recognized that, and as I say, sometimes it's not easy to get a mandate in government. It becomes, colleagues, we call it function grab. Yeah, so it's function grab to say you want to grab functions from others. So, and I'm glad that we successfully grabbed this function, because we needed this function. It was not an easy one. It was a very difficult journey. And I'm really encouraged that we have partners with friends and also researchers who are going to help us really give meaning to that function that we so value
as basic education as an extremely important part of our work and determines to a very large extent the success or the failures that we are going to be faced with. So I once again want to express my heartfelt gratitude to the Lego Foundation for today. As a key partner, they are the reason we have this important data today, which shows the centrality of public-private partnership in our education transformation agenda. And again, I continue to be humbled myself as the Minister of Basic Education that in some instances I don't have to take my ball to treasurer and say, please again, please again. So we have partners who really help make our lives meaningful and give us also, bring for us great partnerships like the research team that was here, skills that sometimes we don't even have in the public sector, or skills that we don't necessarily keep in the public sector for different reasons. So Program Director, the successful migration of ECD from social development would not have been possible without the active involvement of civil society, the corporate sector, religious organizations, non-governmental organizations, and the community. I also have to take this opportunity to really thank my counterpart from social development, who when she came in as a minister said, oh, is this the mandate? Let's work on it. And really made the migration smooth and also manageable. Because this sector has been very instrumental in guiding us, and as we are preparing ourselves to receive the function. So she really played a big role as we were really helped and guided us also, because we were already in the space, guided us on the work that they've done, what the issues are, what the problems were, so that we really benefit from the work that they've done before. So as a department, we are committed to continue to working closely with the sector, other arms of government, as I said, not only social development, which works very well with us, with health, local government, as I said, I have to go and sell this to the Minister of Cocta, who really is also a very highly supportive proponent of basic education, and especially on issues and rights of children. So I'll go to Comrade, to Minister Nkosazana. I'm still in the mood of ANC policy writing. So I'm in that space, so don't take any offense. So I will be speaking to her to say, colleague, I have this information, let's work on it. So I also want to thank, as I said, the civil society, the private sector, to ensure that all children, including those children with disabilities, are provided with quality access to ECD. Because the success of ECD sector will depend on a collective commitment to contribute to our country's plan of achieving universal access to quality ECD programs and services in our lifetime. So the occasion to release the 2021 census is quite a big deal to all of us. Just a day later, should have been yesterday when I had this meeting with the governing board, but it's fine. We have another meeting on Monday, so I'm going to sell the story. It has helped us to better understand early childhood development, the landscape, and inform us better on the resources allocation. We now know, when I saw the figure, it says 42,000, I said, my goodness me, I thought 26,000 schools were a handful. I always say we're a big sector, we have 26,000 schools that we have to take care of. I never thought of 42,000. That we have almost 1.6 million and 1.6 million children that we have to look after. And you know, these ones are double the work. So I think the program director is right. So if you count this, you count 3. It's 3 in 1. So this 1.3 is about 3 times, because they really are something else themselves. You need almost attention. My grandchildren come there and I say, no child without the mother, because I can't be chasing after. So you visit with your kids. When you leave, please go with them. So because they're a handful, and at 3 times the work, you have to check that they're not drowning. They check. just a handful. So we are painfully aware that this number is only a fraction of children in our country, but as I say, it really is one of the key and the most important part of our country. So indeed, Program Director, the census has been very successful in showing us the gap in terms of access to funding, that only 33% of learning programs receive a subsidy from government. And I can tell you, I've been on road shows to engage communities on ECD, on the function shift, just to make sure that people understand what this function shift is. And half the time, the discussions of the others, the 66%, are you now going to subsidize us? Are we going to get, those that are subsidized, are we going to get more money? Those that are not subsidized, is this process about making sure that there's universal access to the money? And when I saw 33%, I said, oh my goodness, I don't know. Treasurer is going to say, you take the biggest chunk of the government department, you're now bringing double the request. Where do you think the money is going to come from? But it's been very helpful even to understand that only 33 gets the subsidy. And we say we want to improve access to make sure that even those that are outside, let alone those that are in learning centers, those that are even outside are part of early learning centers. So it's a big task. And again, we share ideas on an ongoing basis with the DDG to say, what are we going to do now with this function that we've been crying for all the years? It's here now. So what do we do with it? It was better. It was then complaining to say, without ECD, we just don't have solid foundations, and lots of kids come to our schools not ready. They've not, problems have not been remediated in good time and all sorts of things. Now it's here. So we have to deal with it. Only 33% has money. The rest don't have money, let alone that the majority is not even in those early learning centers. But once again, I want to extend our gratitude to all our partners and stakeholders in the ECD ecosystem present here today, because without whom not much will succeed. As DBE, we now have the role of coordinating the sector, and we do continue to commit ourselves to working with and strengthening the intersectoral forums which coordinates the ECD sector. We'll also strengthen the other coordinating structures which have been well articulated in the National Integrated Early Childhood Development Policy. As I conclude, let me again thank Lego Foundation and ICAPADA. It's another one. I wish you had just unpaid what's ICAPADA. For the sterling work done, but over a very short period. Thank you very much for the report and the results. Because as I said, through this data and evidence, we believe that we'll be in a better position to strengthen our planning, our resource allocation, our understanding also of the sector. As I said, it's a sector we've not been involved in. I always tell people I've been involved. The only thing I know in my life is education. I've been involved in education for all my life. And even in that sector, in that space, have not worked with ECD. So it's a very exciting, fresh, new terrain that we go to with all the energy, the excitement, and optimist. My DDG is an optimist, just really saying it's going to happen, and it's going to work and happen well. And with this information, armed with this information, I think our energies will be there, properly channeled, directed, and supported. So thank you very much, Program Director. Thanks to ECD, ICAPADA. I said it right, ne? The ICAPADA and the entire team, but also to our partners, UNICEF, which has always been our partner and supporter. Thank you very much for the support, and also the participants who joined us today. We're very grateful and very appreciative for the ongoing support. Thank you.
Whoa, sugar.
Ladies and gentlemen, a big, big thank you from all of us to our Honourable Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga. Minister, I'd like to say this as well. You are absolutely right. They do say, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. But I can say, after listening to your speech and after listening to all the data that ICAPA data gave us, I can say this, that I feel confident with ECD in your hands that we'll be in a much better position the next time we do the ECD census. So a big thank you. Let's give another warm round of applause. Thank you very much. And you are right, Minister. These kids under 6 pretty much are a handful. So I can say this, it's not often that I have an audience that are listening to me. So I really enjoy the fact that we are having such a productive morning and that you're actually all listening and giving us full attention on stage. But I'm going to make it even harder for you to divert your attention, because it is now my pleasure to introduce to you our panel. They are going to be unpacking our key findings, and we're going to be finding out a bit more about the outcomes and the implications for ECD and learning through play in South Africa. So without I'm getting so excited, I'm stumbling over my words. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the stage, and I'll ask our panelists to come up one by one, and I'll ask them to fill our stage from my right to the side. Please, can I welcome onto stage the Chief Director for Foundations for Learning, DBE, Kulula Manona. Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you so much for joining us. Our next panelist, and he is from UNICEF. He also called me this morning to coordinate his outfit, because I think he's the only other person who is as colorful in what they're wearing. Andre, jy lyk ook asof jy 'n box Lego ingesluk het. So that's fantastic. We both look like we've swallowed a box of Lego. That's fabulous. Andre Vivier, the Education Manager specializing in ECD and the Officer in Charge in the Education and Adolescent Development Section, UNICEF South Africa. Let's give him a huge round of applause. And Andre, after this panel discussion, if you could please leave those socks for me, because I need to take them home. They are fabulous. Our next panelist I'd like to invite to the stage is the board member of the NECDA, and that's the National ECD Alliance, and the chairperson of the Intersectional Forum. Please welcome Rex Molefe. Thank you so much, Mr. Molefe. So I was actually thinking, is it Rex or is it Rek? But I'm going to stick with Rex. Joking. Our next panelist I'd like to welcome to stage is Nicholas Dowdell, the program specialist for the Lego Foundation. There we go. And then I'd like to also welcome on, and I'm thinking, have I missed anyone? No, good. Then, yes, Aisha. Yes, absolutely. No. I'm making sure, because Aisha's got on the scarf I wish I was wearing. So please, can I welcome the Director for Education Management Information Systems, for which is the EMIS of the DBE, Aisha Suleiman. Let's give a huge round of applause. And then that leaves space for me. So super, super excited. But yes, our panel, we've had all our findings. We have the guys from ICAPA data. Johan, thank you very much. Johan, your accent, where are you from?
German.
German. I imported my husband from Germany too. I just want to say that. So herzlich willkommen, und wir sind sehr, sehr froh, dass wir alle diese Informationen bekommen haben. I like how you guys are all looking at me. You like it when I talk foreign to you, hey? I see you guys looking there. But yes, no, we, again, are all speaking the universal language of love here. Because I think when it comes to ECD and our Honourable Minister, I think you'll agree with me that when you're working with something as special as ECD, a lot of it is about work, it's about calling, but a lot of it is also about love. And this is love for our own children, but also, again, recognizing the fact that we are part of a global community and of a village that it takes to raise our children. So it's out of love for children. I'm going to ask the first question to you, Kulula. What is your overall takeaway from the census?
So, Joanne, I think we just need to remind ourselves about the purpose of the census, which is to enumerate. So the counting has happened, and I think we saw from what Jan presented here that we have about 42,420 ECD centers, but that it does not really say to us that all of our children, 6 million of our children, are actually in ECD learning or early learning programs. So we have a lot of children who are outside of being able to be afforded those early learning opportunities. We've also seen that there is quite a number of ECD centers or early learning programs that are not being supported in terms of funding, when we have a really mean 33% of those who are receiving government funding. So for us, what is the big take is that we have to think as government about how do we expand that access to those children who are outside of that access net.
Very, very true. And I want to actually follow up with another question to you, and then I'm going to ask the other panelists. I found some of the findings surprising too, but for you, what were some of the most surprising findings from the census for the DBE?
So the most sobering one for us, taking into account that as government, we are implementing the national curriculum framework, which centralizes play. So what really was a sobering one was to learn that play actually is not being afforded as a free play opportunity for children. So what it tells us is that we have quite a lot of work that we need to do in terms of professional development of our practitioners to understand the power of play and to understand how to integrate it into what happens in the early learning program.
Very, very true. Andre, I'd like to pose the question to you now. The global pandemic, and I mean, this is something that we'll be talking about for years and years to come, but it's left a lasting impact on children all over the globe, on adults, but I think in particular on children, our most vulnerable. The census findings corroborate many fears that the number of children accessing ECD has dropped substantially as a result of the pandemic. How can we begin to reverse what I think we'd all agree in this room is quite a worrying trend?
Thank you very much. Allow me first to say congratulations to everybody being involved in this ECD census. And I think rightfully I should say, and I think we have seen that from UNICEF side across the world, the pandemic had an impact on families and children, because I don't think we can isolate children from the families that they were in. And the stress in the family had obviously an impact on children, but also family resources, and especially in a context like South Africa, where most of our, or quite a large number, as the census also show, family members had to pay fees for children to attend early learning and development programs, where they simply did not have the means. But if you also look at, and I looked at that before the census, and I will just corroborate with that, but the Stats SA data shows actually that we had a significant drop in attendance of ECD centers, while strangely enough, we had an increase in childminding, which is looking at alternatives. How do we reverse that? I think first and foremost is to reverse, and if I look particularly on the issues of the early learning losses and all of that, I think we need to start with parents and empowering and enabling parents to understand what they need to do, the importance of them as facilitators of early learning, of play, and all of that. Because in this country, more than 50% of children are anyway with their parents and not in programs. But also further to that is, and I don't say it because the Lego Foundation is here, but I think the important thing of play. Play is not only about having fun, it also is an incredibly important instrument in psychosocial care and support. And for helping children to make meaning about what they have experienced in this pandemic. And then obviously, and I have to say that because Casper is giving me a look, play-based learning is very important in education. And I think the last thing is we need to look and to start to change this, and not to only look at ECD in a very narrow way and to reverse for children. I just say, let's focus on ECD centers. I think we need to look at that there is a spectrum and diversify and say, okay, how can we support parents, early childhood development centers, play groups, childminders, toy libraries, mobile, and bring all of that together. And I think that is the good thing that the census have covered in a systematic way. And I want to conclude this is to come back to say, and I think that's the good thing about the function shift and being part of the DBE, that we need to develop and embed a system for early childhood development and need to avoid a piecemeal kind of trying to fix it and reverse the impact.
Very, very true. Thank you so much for your insights. Just for all of you tuning in from your home offices or from your offices, those of you who might actually also be tuning in with your kids on your around your desk and so on, because we do understand some people are still working from home. But thank you so much for your input. I see quite a couple of tweets coming through there using the hashtag ECD Census. And again, very, very sobering facts, but it's so good to understand what we are dealing with so that we can move forward in a more constructive way. I'm now going to move on to you, Mr. Molefe. What findings stood out for you personally in the census report?
Thanks, Program Director. And firstly, allow me to point it out that as the sector, we fully welcome and appreciate the ECD Census. It's incredible, it's historical in the history of early child development. My take on the census is that firstly, it is diagnostic in nature, in that it does point out the gaps and weaknesses in the entire ecosystem of early childhood development. And I can quickly zoom into those that are, pertinent, which I believe are quite urgent. Is a starking revelation that half of the ECD workforce, they are, not qualified, if underqualified. Now that makes that we need to prioritize that and begin to develop a well-costed human resource development plan. And in that, we ought to prioritize issues of retaining and where this current existing workforce, they cannot be lost, but they need to be reskilled, upskilled, and skilled so that that can assist in the improvement of the function. So that is the highlight as far as this report is concerned. It's diagnostic in nature. And it is these findings that need to enable us as we seek to improve the function to address those gaps and weaknesses within the entire ecosystem of early child development. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And that is so true. You cannot fix what you don't know. So we know what work needs to be done now. Nicholas, I see you nodding there, very, very excited about the work that will be done, but also with the Lego Foundation. So much work has been done. Nicholas, of course, as we said, our program specialist from the Lego Foundation. Can you unpack some of the lessons learned from carrying out a project of this magnitude?
So many questions.
Can you hear him okay, or can I give him my microphone? I'm going to give you my microphone. Oh, there we go.
So a project like this has never actually been carried out before in South Africa. And we need to make sure that we really capture all of the lessons that we learned so that future efforts of this nature can benefit from the wealth of knowledge created through this process. I'll mention a few, some of them Jan mentioned, but I think the particularly important ones were around working closely with stakeholders on the ground, because something like this can't be achieved without that deep engagement. So from engaging with ward councillors to local DSD officials to clinics and other services, or just members of communities, that engagement was critical. And I'm really glad to say the team from Ikapa Data put a huge amount of effort into that, and that really unlocked the ability to find and locate so many of these ECD programs that were previously unknown to us. So engagement at a local level. Also creation of awareness. So as you heard, there was a large awareness campaign that ran throughout the program, but particularly at the beginning. It was through print media, community radios, social media. There was a really strong message that was sent out to the country and the sector. And I think that the success of that really meant that when field workers eventually arrived at the doors of ECD programs, there was often knowledge of this, and doors were opened because of that. And perhaps finally, we need a strong visual identity and project identity. So everything from branded collateral, wearing face masks with ECD Census, posters, a strong visual identity really also helped project recognition in communities, so that people knew about it. People could recognize field workers when they came into the community and knew that this was a bona fide project. And finally, I think we realized, and the team from Recover Data went through a journey, and sometimes the wonderful technological solutions that they came up with worked really well, but other times too much technology could actually be an inhibitor, and at times we had to think, okay, we need to rein in some of the tech use, because field workers are actually spending too much time doing admin on the tablets and have maybe lost sight of the primary purpose, which is going into communities and finding ECD programs. So striking that balance was essential, but they managed to do that really well. And I think just finally, I was blown away by the professionalism and efficiency of the team at Recover Data and how they carried out this task, but even more so by the willingness and openness of the ECD sector and all the thousands of ECD programs that opened their doors, welcomed us in, and wanted to be part of this monumental effort. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. And yes, it is interesting, because it's also true. You know, you need the data, but it's also nice for these ECD facilities for them to see that they are seen and that they are counted and that they are appreciated, and that we're taking the time to actually go, okay, what can we do to help? So fantastic work done there, and a big thank you for that. Aisha, I want to move on to your question now. Can you share some of the pipeline plans or the next steps following unpacking the census results?
Thank you, Joanne, for the question. But before I actually answer you, I owe it to my little one for the color.
So we both styled by our kids.
I'm so glad I did, because I mean, she said, "Mom, you can't go to a Lego and play with Lego dressed in black." So I'm so glad I listened to my little one, and it's important to heed our kids, and it's just important to heed data. And you know, with a sector as large as Department of Basic Education, we are really one of the largest governmental departments in South Africa. We rely very heavily on data and information, you know, for planning, for decision making that is very data driven, correct resource allocation. So it's all based on good quality data. And we are finding ourselves in a very positive situation. We transitioned into the shift of the ECD function from DSD to Department of Basic Education on a very positive note, because we have the best set of data ever in the history of South Africa. So I'm very proud to be a part of the project, to be part of the collaboration with the Lego Foundation. And you know, the fact that DBE is so reliant on information, it's important for us to understand the numbers. There's the numbers. It's been, you know, it's announced. It's 42,420 ECD programs out there. But so what? You know, what do we do with this information is very, very critical. So firstly, disseminating that data is important. And as DBE, we have a strategy on how we disseminate our information. In fact, the teams are very busy at the moment in crafting and preparing the subset of data that we will be publishing in our website. It is the baseline of the master list data of the ECD services in the country. So it's just a subset of the data that was collected. We will shortly be publishing that, and we will, of course, be disseminating the data quite extensively, including with with the recommendations coming through from ICOPA data. What is important is, developing policy based on this information, developing insights, but actionable insights that make a positive difference on the ground, to ensure that we have services, correct services, directed to the correct children in the sector. And yeah, this is really going to support going forward in alleviating a number of the challenges and ensuring that we have the correct services and the quality services to every child in South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Aisha, I'm going to say this as well. It is so lovely for me as a mother of young children to know that it is such a passionate team who are behind using this data and doing what needs to be done. So thank you. You've already started unpacking this question, and I'm just going to stay with you for a moment. You're the director for EMIS at the DBE. That's a lot of ABCs. Joking. Early learning programs are something new for you to incorporate into your systems. And how will you manage this integration? You've started alluding to it. How are you going to manage that? Because it is quite a big task.
Absolutely. It's a new task, a very exciting one, but also a very daunting one. It's a huge elephant in the room. And the strategy of the department, especially in the EMIS domain, is to chew this elephant one bite at a time. And we've started with that over the many months, in fact, over the last year, in fact, on preparing, on developing a management information system, specifically for ECDs and ECD services. So we firstly start with collaborating with key stakeholders, and the LEGO Foundation is a very key stakeholder. This is not the last that we will be seeing the LEGO Foundation. They have supported extensively in getting the baseline information, for integration into our DBE systems. But we will be also working extensively with them in developing a management information system. We also have started collaborating with the Ilifa Labantwana organization, and they have been very supportive in crafting a roadmap of going forward. So we plan on developing an automated management information system to alleviate many of the inefficiencies that's currently been experienced. For example, registration of ECDs, it's very manual. And we are in the fourth industrial revolution. We need to really transform processes and automate processes. So that's our plan. We have a very concrete roadmap for the next 3 years, focusing on registration and automating those processes, but also not just registration, it's also funding allocation, for example, monitoring, quality assurance. So there's a real crafted plan that we are going to be really busy with to implement. And watch the space. We are going to be launching within the next couple of years a fully fledged integrated management information system to firstly maintain the data that has been collected through the census. But it's not just merely a collection tool. It's about enabling the ECD sector to manage their everyday administrative tasks. So provinces and districts that capture information for registration, they will be able to monitor this, at that level. So we are working extensively well with the provinces and the districts to craft all of these plans. So I'm looking forward to a lot of work that's ahead of us. Thank you.
I can see your excitement. So thank you very, very much. I really am delighted. And I think also as soon as the administrative things are cleared out of the way, the educators can get back to doing what they do best. So I move on to you again. Kulula, I've got a question for you. And it's what are the main components that will be of focus for the DBE?
Joanne, to answer that question, I think I do need to say that there are two key outcomes for government and for our partners when it comes to ECD, and those are access and quality. And so the components that I'm going to talk to you about actually fit into these two key outcomes. So the first thing that we have learned through this data, thanks again to you, Jan, and your field workers, is that there is a need for us to mobilize resources resources. You had the minister there talking about going to National Treasury after she is actually the biggest consumer of the budget that comes from National Treasury already, to say now that we have added ECD to my portfolio. So how do we then ensure that we really do put money to where we need to really focus this funding to? The second one, there has been a revelation about the barriers that lie to ensuring that ECD centers or early learning programs are funded. And we know that what really informs that funding is the registration of these early learning programs. So we have a number of barriers that we've already been able to unearth as we're preparing to receive this function. So that's one of the function of the key areas and focus areas that we're going to be focusing on to ensure that we really find ways of just dealing with those barriers. Also, the third one is what we've been speaking about, and I saw Rex was looking at me when he spoke about the development of a human resource development plan. This is something that we've agreed to do as a sector. So these findings about whether gaps in terms of the capacity where professional development of our ECD practitioners lies has been very useful to us, because in that human resource development plan, we are going to ensure that that professional development really focuses on ensuring that our practitioners know how to integrate play into the curriculum delivery that they do in the early learning centers. So I also do want to talk about the fact that besides these points that I've spoken about, we have inherited this function, and inheriting this function meant that as the DBE, we needed information and needed evidence that we're going to be able to develop programs on. And this has been one of the very useful informants in terms of giving us that information and that evidence. So we know now that if we talk about access, who accesses ECD? How many of our children access ECD? Besides the early learning programs, Minister spoke about many of the children who are outside of the early learning programs. And those are children, for instance, who are in the age groups of 0 to 3. And for that age group, we need a different response. How do we ensure that we have family support programs that are going to provide information, that are going to provide opportunities for those children? How are we going to ensure that we increase support for other services like the mobile ECD programs that have to visit, like the play groups? And so you spoke earlier on, and I think it was Andre who spoke about the spike in day mothers, which has been a direct response to COVID. And so all of that needs to be supported. The most important thing about this data is that it really shows the need for us to collaborate with other departments and other role makers, to collaborate with the sector. So there's a very a clear path that has to be drawn for how are we going to collaborate with the Department of Health. We saw the results about the nutrition and how government contributes to nutrition. We run a successful school nutrition program, but what we need to do for ECD is to model that so that it is able to fit into the context of ECD. So the Department of Health is very key in terms of providing services to the 0 to 3 age group. How the family program is going to be supported is through our collaboration with the Department of Health. There is
Sorry, no, and it's so exciting because I do see how the integration is playing a huge role. I'm aware that I am slightly cutting you off here because I just want to give our 3 panelists in the middle a chance to say, because we have very limited time with those tuning in also via our streaming. So I'd like to continue this conversation as well off the stage later on, because I think there is opportunity for us to have the conversation. Andre, I want to ask you your last question. How can all stakeholders work together to ensure that all vulnerable children in our communities are taken care of?
Okay, I think to start off...
And I'm going to ask you for an abbreviated answer.
I'm going to be very abbreviated to say that stakeholders need, in ECD, we like to tell stories, and I hope all the time. Up to now, we have told the story of ECD without facts. Now we can tell the story of ECD with facts. We can change the story of ECD in the country based on facts. And for stakeholders, and I think that story being changed, and I have to say that it's also under one leadership of a seamless education system under the minister, the DG, and with ECD, DGG Geier and Kulula and the likes. But just to leave to say, think of the word child and how stakeholders can work together. And put the child in the middle and use the C to say how we collaborate, how we work together on a common agenda and a common goal. And the H for, and we keep on saying that, is human resources. We're not going to get quality early learning and development programs if we don't invest in our human resources. We can have the best whatever. If you look at the I, it is for inclusion, that everybody is included and through diverse programs. And that we leverage the collective. I think together we can do so much. And the last one is, if we really pull together, we can change the destiny of each child and of the country.
I love the playful way in which you did that too. So absolutely, we're keeping the child in the middle. Rex, last question for you, and I'm also giving you an abbreviated opportunity to answer this. But I think it ties into what Andre was saying. What are your plans to upskill and future-proof the workforce?
Thanks, Program Director. Like I've indicated earlier on that in the absence of this data, one cannot be able to plan. But now we've got data. We are able now to plan our training interventions, and we will be able to also to use this data to engage authorities like the South African qualification authorities, the CETAs, because the CETAs, they need to come on board because they are mandated with the responsibility to assist in as far as training and development is concerned. We also need to look into the National Learner Record Database of the South African qualification authorities and to check exactly how many people are being uploaded that have qualified on various qualifications in early child development. So with this data, that is exactly what we are going to be able to do. And then we are saying from the civil society, and especially as a training and resource organization, we do have capacity, and we are pledging our support to effectively partner and collaborate with DBE in order to ensure that this ECD workforce, they are trained so that professionalization and the professionalization of the sector is being realized. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Molefe. And Nicholas, your final question, and I like that it's a forward-looking question. I hope you like it too. What are some of the next steps for the Lego Foundation?
Thanks, Joanne. So some of them have already been alluded to by Aisha. We certainly are in this to support and collaborate with the DBE beyond just the census project. And this provides us with the foundation and the data, but we're certainly going to be supporting to actually build out and pilot this education management information system going forward that ultimately needs to reduce a whole lot of the pain points in the sector and really enable access to be broadened and quality to be improved. And another thing quickly is that both the census and the Thrive by 5 studies that have just been released have given us fantastic data on a national scale. But we're really excited that over the next 8 months, we're going to be doing a deep dive on a small number of programs and really understanding at the level of the practitioner and the classroom, what are some of the levers that are leading to improved outcomes for children, and how can we translate that into a solid set of solutions for the sector.
Fantastic. Nicholas, thank you so much. And to our panel, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and your insights in a very succinct way. I think we've managed to be as on time as possible when we had space for play as well. But I just want to say again to our panelists, I hope that you'll be joining us for lunch and that we'll have a chance to dive into some of the questions we didn't get a chance to ask and answer on stage. But I think we've had an opportunity to jump in quite a lot of what we'll be unpacking over the next couple of months. So a big thank you to them, a significant amount they've given us to consider, and we can definitely see the passion for the sector. So a big, big thank you. It is often said that play is what pulls together the logical and the creative parts of the brain. So in a few moments, we're going to invite you, and that's you here in our physical audience, to those of you who have tuned in on your laptops or your computers or your smartphones from at home or your work offices. Thank you so much for giving your time and taking your time to be part of this monumental exercise where we unpack our ECD census results. A big, big thank you to all of you. Those who are here, we're going to invite you to play some games with us, brought to you by Hope Worldwide. And after we've had some food for thought, we'll be having some actual food. We'll invite you for lunch. I had a little bit of a taster earlier, and I can assure you that the food is good here. But I'd also like to now invite our acting DG, Dr. Granville Whittle, to stage to officially bring our event to a close. I think our panel, let's sit here for a moment, and then Dr. Whittle, I'll invite you onto stage to come and do the closing remarks. Thank you very much. Let's give him a round of applause as he makes his way to stage.
Thank you very much, Program Director, Minister, and all our valued partners. It is a pleasure for me to bring this very successful event to a close this morning. But before I do so, I think that there's a couple of key points that I just want to re-emphasize. So the first one is that the information from this particular census will enable our planning for reforms in the ECD space. And so two of the key issues I think that we will confront over the next few years is the issue of access to quality programs. I thought that the numbers of about 1.5 million enrolled, are actually very low for a country like South Africa. And so there's a lot of work that I think we will have to continue to do. Minister alluded to the Thrive by 5, and there's about 30% of our children that are stunted. And so in addition to improving the quality of programming, which Nicholas is talking about, those kids are at a severe disadvantage. And so stunting will have to be one of the key issues that we will have to address going forward. We are grateful to the Lego Foundation for all of your support. We look forward to continue to work with you, as Nicholas has said, in some of the projects that you've identified. ICAPA Data, we want to say thank you very much to you as well. And thank in particular all of the planning teams, the field workers, the ECD programs that opened their doors, the sector who partnered with us in sharing the information for the census, and we continue to look forward to work with you. Thank you very much to the panelists. And lastly, can we have a round of applause for our excellent program director? Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much to you. And ladies and gentlemen, all that remains for me to say is Fluit, my story is uit Bekuma and Ukuba apa namhlanje. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to being part of this movement. Please, Minister, send me, because I realize more and more the importance of ECD. I realize the privilege that I have with my children, but let's all make sure that we never lose sight of the fact that it takes a village to raise a child, and let's take up our roles in that village and leave no child behind. Thank you to our panelists. Good afternoon or good morning. Have a wonderful morning. Lunch is served and some wonderful games are to be played. Please do stay with us. Thank you.
Let's wave our arms. Let's wave our arms. Let's stomp our feet.